Hello everyone, I'm Phoenidence. Today, I'm going to tell you a ghost story that happened in the 13th apartment. We've seen a lot of zombie movies from Hong Kong and the United States, but are there any related stories in Taiwan? The answer is yes, and it's an event that happened in an old community in Taipei. Next, please listen to me as I tell you about this terrifying zombie murder case. This is a mysterious zombie murder case that occurred in 1997. At the time, people who were present either died or lost contact. Later, various newspapers and magazines reported on it, but no one knew the truth. According to the Taipei City Police Department, it was just an ordinary homicide case and had nothing to do with zombies. The location where this event took place, the 13th apartment, has been demolished, and the landlord has emigrated to the United States and cannot be contacted. In a quiet corner of Taipei stands an old 7-story, well-worn apartment building known as Apartment 13. This apartment complex, with over 4 decades of history, wears the scars of time on its facade, adorned with climbing vines. Its reputation, however, is not just tied to its age and appearance. It's infamous for being a place where unfortunate tragedies have occurred. It is, in fact, a notorious place known for its dark past. Room 404 is tucked away in the darkest corner of the 4th floor corridor in Apartment 13. To reach it, you must navigate several winding corners, even after exiting the elevator. Even during the daytime, sunlight struggles to penetrate this far, and as a result, this room comes at the lowest price, making it the most affordable option. In room 444, there resides a young couple who seem to have eloped from somewhere else. However, the other residents of Apartment 13, uninterested in the affairs of their neighbors, typically refrain from meddling. Nonetheless, this passionate pair frequently engages in heated arguments, at times disturbing the peace and quiet of the apartment. Yet, because Apartment 13 lacks a caretaker or manager, everyone simply endures the disruption in silence, reluctant to voice their grievances. But on this particular day, the intensity of their argument had reached unprecedented levels. It was accompanied by the unmistakable sound of heavy objects crashing. This time, the residents on the 4th floor could no longer tolerate it. They stormed out of their rooms and loudly voiced their grievances to the couple in room 444. However, as soon as the neighbors confronted them, the tumultuous noise from room 444 ceased completely. Perplexed, the other residents returned to their own rooms, firmly closing their doors, and chose to ignore the situation, no longer willing to pay any attention to the quarreling couple. Strangely, nobody ever saw that couple again after that day. A month later, the landlord brought a plumber and an electrician to open the door to room 444. Upon entering, they were hit with an overpowering stench. The room was in disarray, but there was no sign of anyone living there. It was evident that nobody had been in the room for quite some time. The plumber and electrician hastily inspected the room and reported their findings to the landlord before making a hasty exit, almost as if they were fleeing the scene. The landlord wasted no time and called a cleaning company to thoroughly clean and sanitize the room. The very next day, the for rent sign was hung again, and life in Apartment 13 carried on as if nothing had ever happened. The new tenant in room 444 was a construction worker who kept to himself, coming and going early in the morning and returning late at night. he rarely exchanged greetings with his neighbors, preferring to retire to his room for a peaceful sleep. Then, one fateful night, a blood-curdling scream emanated from room 444, followed by an eerie silence. In a panic, the fourth-floor residents rushed out of their rooms and began knocking on room 444's door. However, there was no response. Concerned for the safety of their neighbor, someone reached for their phone and dialed the emergency number. In no time, 2 police officers arrived on the scene. After multiple knocks and still no response, they used the key provided by the landlord to unlock the door. What they discovered inside was a gruesome scene. The construction worker lay lifeless on the floor, with the room splattered in blood. His body bore the horrific marks of what appeared to be a savage, animal-like attack, as if he had been torn apart and mutilated. The police cordoned off the area, and shortly thereafter, a team of forensic experts and prosecutors arrived to examine the scene and question the fourth-floor residents. Once the police and investigators had finished their work and left, a haunting atmosphere hung over the fourth floor. Many residents, overwhelmed by the sense of dread, sought temporary refuge with friends outside the building, too afraid to remain in such an unsettling environment. The few remaining residents often heard the eerie sound of footsteps in the corridor late at night. It was as if someone were shuffling along, half walking and half dragging their feet, a feeble and unsteady gait. However, a thick veil of fear prevented anyone from venturing out to investigate these unsettling sounds. One fateful night, the residents on the fourth floor were jolted awake by a series of relentless knocks on doors. The sound originated from room 444 and echoed through the corridor. Rooms 443 and 442 were vacant, with no occupants to respond. The tenant of room 441 had not returned, and the resident of room 440 had sought refuge at a friend's place. Fear gripped the tenant in room 445 as they heard footsteps approaching their own door. They stood still, trembling with anxiety. Then came the urgent and insistent knocking on room 445's door. Terrified, the resident dared not open it. Shortly after, they heard the same sequence of knocking moving down the corridor to room 446 and onwards, all the way to room 449. After that, an eerie silence settled in the hallway, leaving the residents in a state of dread and confusion. The following morning, the few remaining residents emerged from their apartments and discovered watermarks on the corridor floor, evidence that someone had walked there during the night. At this point, there was no one left who dared to stay. They hastily made arrangements to stay, with friends or check it into hotels, and simultaneously, they all called the landlord to express their desire to terminate their leases and move out as soon as possible. The ominous events in apartment 13 had driven them to flee from what had become an increasingly terrifying place to live. The haunting events on the fourth floor of apartment 13 became a sensation in the news, prompting a few bold adventurers and journalists to request temporary accommodations from the landlord. However, just 3 days later, several of these journalists hurriedly departed, refusing to discuss the story any further. Whatever they had encountered during their stay in apartment 13 had clearly left a profound and unsettling impact, driving them to abandon the story altogether. However, among these bold adventurers, one individual went missing. This person went directly to stay in room 444, and that decision led to their disappearance. The police were once again called to investigate room 444. Ultimately, they discovered a trail of blood leading up to the bathroom ceiling. When they brought in the plumber and electrician to open up the bathroom ceiling for inspection, they made a gruesome discovery. Inside the hidden space, they found the lifeless bodies of a man who turned out to be a daring, bold adventurer, and a woman. The woman's body was desiccated and pallid, indicating she had been deceased for at least 2 months or more. The mystery of Apartment 13 continued to unravel, with its secrets becoming even darker and more perplexing. As the forensic experts lowered the 2 bodies from the maintenance opening and laid them on the ground, an unsettling sight met the eyes of those present. The deceased woman's appearance sent shivers down everyone's spine. She had disheveled hair, completely white eyes, devoid of pupils, sharp, blood-stained fangs, and long pointed fingernails. Her tattered clothing completed the eerie image. She looked almost like a creature out of a horror tale, a vampire or zombie, but no one dared to utter such words aloud. The inexplicable horror of Apartment 13 had taken a terrifying turn, leaving everyone in a state of shock and disbelief. The daring, bold adventurer had suffered brutal injuries, with bite marks covering his entire body. His throat had been bitten through, half of his face devoured, and his limbs broken and shattered. His death was a gruesome and nightmarish sight. Strangely, when the 2 bodies were taken away by the funeral home, this horrifying incident was not reported in the news, shrouding Apartment 13 in an even deeper veil of secrecy and darkness. Since then, the 4th floor of Apartment 13 remained unoccupied, slowly deteriorating and falling into disrepair. Residents from other floors would still occasionally hear the faint sound of footsteps in the corridor late at night, leaving the haunted mysteries of Apartment 13 to linger, casting a long and eerie shadow over the entire building. The authenticity of this event is no longer verifiable. According to folklore experts, when a person dies with a grudge, they will choke on a mouthful of resentment in their throat. If this resentment does not dissipate, the body will not decay, eventually turns into a zombie that eats people and drinks blood. In fact, there are many similar legends circulating around the world. Perhaps one day you will accidentally encounter one. Remember to send the story to Phoenidance. See you next time.